NJ.com and the Star Ledger welcome to the Rutgers Rant, your one-stop podcast for the Scarlet Knights, with your hosts Steve Politti and Rutgers insiders Brian Fonseca and Pat Lenny. Let's start chopping.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Rutgers Rant. Hope you had a lovely Thanksgiving. We did. We were busy. A lot of going on. A couple of time zones, East Lansing, Las Vegas. How'd you do, Brian? What was the final tally? I don't want to know. Or should we not say? Did you rally at least at the end here in Las Vegas?
So what I would call it is sort of the Ace Bailey experience of Las Vegas, where I had some really, really high highs, some very low lows, and I would rather not explain which side of the roller coaster I landed on. I am just thankful. Talk about Thanksgiving. I am thankful. I am back home in New Jersey, and I still have all my articles of clothing, and my kneecaps are still intact.
I love it. You weren't the only one that came home with losses from Las Vegas. We'll talk about the basketball team unable to finish a couple of big games out there. I think we should talk about football because obviously the season finale, a big victory over Michigan State. And I got to tell you, and this is funny. I was thinking about how to put this season in perspective now that they're 7-5, regular season over, waiting for the bowl selection. And I think in sports, and I do this for, sports opinion for a living, so I've got a perspective on this. We have a hard time handling the gray area. Like, it's much easier when it's black and white. Like the Giants, everyone should get fired. They suck. It's very easy to do an opinion on that. The Chiefs, look at that, 11-1. They're the best team in the history of football. It's great. It's easy. This Rutgers season is fascinating because if you want to sit here and tell me you think it's a complete, utter disaster and they should have done better than this and they've wasted this opportunity, the schedule was too easy and they blew these couple games, I'm listening. But if you're like Greg Shannon, you want to stand there and tell me, hey, 7-5, man, look where we were. We were 4-4. We lost all these guys playing with second stringers. We still managed to eke out 7 wins. We haven't won 7 wins in 10 years. I'm listening to that too, right? I mean, it's like, yeah. Pat, I don't know. It feels like it's in the middle here. Which side are you leaning toward?
I think when they were on the 4-game losing streak, and it seemed so grim that it makes me view this season with the glass half full, that they were able to salvage the season, get to a bowl, finish strong and bounce back again after that Illinois loss, which again could have derailed the season, but they didn't. They came out and played its best game. So I lean towards the glass half full approach, and that they really salvaged the season, not once, but twice, in my opinion.
I'm glad you took that side, Pat, because I feel very strongly about the other side. I would not say it's exactly black and white, but I'll say this. Obviously, the injuries played a part in this, right? And it's tough to ignore that. I think that, Politti, you nailed it on the head. With your column after the game, people are going to spend the rest of their lives wondering, what if with this season? Here are the numbers that are going to just make your head spin and make you want to bash your head against the wall. The combined record for the 12 teams Rutgers played this season was 67-77. Rutgers played 2 teams with a winning record, and they beat one of them, and they were one bad coaching decision away from beating the other and going to the Citrus Bowl. The strength of schedule they finished with 73rd nationally. That is 1 spot ahead of the University of Massachusetts. That is ahead of only 3 Power 5 teams, UNC, your Tar Heels, and SMU. Make that 2. I apologize. The closest Big Ten team was Indiana, 65th, and Oregon, the Big Ten champions. Purdue, the worst team in the Big Ten since maybe the 2016 Rutgers Scarlet Knights, had the 6th hardest schedule in the country, and then they fired their head coach. So it could be worse. To go back to the combined record thing, they played 4 teams with a 500 record. They played 6 teams with a losing record. 6. Half of their schedule had a losing record. You think about the way they lost these games. The time out of Illinois. You lost by 7 points to what turned out to be a not good, maybe even bad Nebraska team. Completely no-showed and got demolished by the worst Wisconsin team in 20 years. The worst. The only Wisconsin team that did not sniff the top 25 since the year I was born. Since I've been alive, they've been in the AP top 25 every year. This is the first time. And I'm not old. I'm not exactly young. And they were shredded shredded by a UCLA team that is at best mediocre.
Yeah.
2 of their 5 wins are against Fresno State and Hawaii. I got a little bit more. This was supposed to be the greatest season in program history. Or I shouldn't say that. One of the greatest seasons in program history. Everything was in front of them. They will probably not have this much experience and this much talent together for a while, right? Unless, Bernard Marcus's family trust, may he rest in peace, decides to dump billions of dollars into Rutgers the way Larry Ellison, or maybe one of these billionaires will marry a huge Rutgers fan like Larry Ellison, who married a huge Michigan fan, is deciding to dump $12 million on the number 1 quarterback in the country to make his wife happy. Unless that happens, I don't think this will happen again. So again, and they have the easiest schedule they will ever have. They will never have an easier schedule in the Big Ten ever.
That is true.
They went 7-5. 7-5. I think you cannot be happy with that. I think you have to be so frustrated and so upset and feel like it was a wasted opportunity because everything was in front of you. And again, I understand the injuries. I understand the situations. I understand the season, and every game takes a life of its own.
Right.
But
I hear you. It might be, it just might be a both things are true situation, because I remember standing next to you after in Southern Cal when they fell to 4-4, thinking that they're going to go 4-8. I know I felt 5-7 would have been. I thought 6-6 would have been a miracle. They almost went 8-4. I mean, I guess I come back to that. And the one thing I will say, Pat, about the injuries, and maybe this is the one area where I feel myself aligning with the Brian side of this more than the Lanny side of this, is simply that this team didn't get the players back. And they still won games late in the year. It wasn't like all these guys suddenly, oh, now they're healthy again, and now they're this juggernaut. No, they lost more players. They lost Alex Lewis. They lost more guys at the end of the year. They still managed to beat these teams, bad teams, late in the year, where, again, middle of the season, the no-shows, and it wasn't just that they lost to UCLA. It was the homecoming, the way they got absolutely obliterated. The defense was unprepared. I will say that is the one thing I will. I don't know if you can make an argument to the other side of that one, the fact that the injuries never got better.
Never got better. You're absolutely right. It was almost, I can't, Greg Schiano says he's never encountered a situation like this in all of his years of coaching. I'll take his word on that. I can't think of any situation that I've ever encountered where all these, it was week after week, new guy after new guy. And even the guys that were playing, like Tyrone Powell was going through multiple injuries. Kyle Monungai fought through injuries, right? Like all these key guys that were even on the field were still banged up. I think the injury thing was a huge deal. It just showed that these guys stuck together to me, like being around them and just hearing them talk, and like the character of the team came out. And that's what Greg Schiano was talking about in that final post-game press conference after Michigan State. Like he was so thankful for these guys for giving it their all and staying in there. And that's like the gray area of this situation is that they could have quit twice and they didn't. I think that speaks more than whatever the schedule was. Like that's what you're going to remember about this season in my eyes. Like that's what sports is all about. Like the good part of it. So
the second time they shouldn't have had that. They shouldn't have faced that second time opportunity to quit. That's the one thing about that.
That one's self-inflicted.
When you shoot yourself in the foot and you limp into the emergency room, that's not necessarily courageous. I get it. It's not the player's fault that happened. But yeah, I mean, to lean toward the Fonseca side of that argument, Brian, I mean, yeah, that part of it, it's hard to.
So there's a lot I want to go off here, right? Like I do want to give credit to the team in that I wasn't able to do a film review. I just didn't have time, right? But I did watch some of the game and the highlights. And I wrote, if I was going to write a film review, my lead would have been that the motivation gap on paper was this big, right? Like Michigan State had so much more reason to play hard. And on the second play of the game, I'm watching Malcolm Ray run across from one side of the defensive line, sprint down the sideline, and to catch a Michigan State running back like 30 yards down the field. Yeah. I'm watching Kyle Monungai, who has nothing to prove. Just fucking, sorry, I shouldn't have, just, I'm getting so fired up. Just barrel through guys and like, push a pile of 10 defenders down, 3 yards down the field. Like, he has no reason to, especially how banged up he's been this year, to do all that. And he's still doing it, and he's becoming officially the second most prolific running back in the history of the program and cementing his legacy. Like, that to me was very impressive. And if I'm a Rutgers fan, I'm very encouraged that, the culture, you can talk about it all you want. That to me is a perfect example of like, this team had nothing to do, and they went out and just kicked another Big Ten team that had to win, just kicked their ass. They just beat the brakes off of Michigan State. And another thing that's going to have you go drive up a wall watching that game, if you're a Rutgers fan, is that offense looked so good. Rutgers has an offense that moves the ball, they have a wide receiver in Ian Strong, who is a budding superstar, 4 straight games with a touchdown catch. First time for a Rutgers player since Mark Harrison in 2011. You have a kicker who's the best kicker in at least 10 years, since Sansante. First, I think it's 11 consecutive makes. First in Sansante in 2011. You have the best running back you will have in at least 20 years. He's a generational player, Kyle Minogue guy, right? And you won 7 games. Like that to me, because of a defense that's supposed to be the backbone, that is the baby of the head coach and a great defensive coordinator. Let me just give you some numbers here. This to me adds context to this. Every team in the Big Ten, aside from Maryland, every team, Northwestern, Purdue, Indiana, has won at least 9 games in at least one season since Rutgers joined the Big Ten, aside from Maryland. Northwestern won 10 games 3 times in the past 10 years. Northwestern. Purdue won 9 games. Purdue beat top 10 Ohio State. All this happened since Rutgers was in the Big Ten. And Rutgers, in its best season, that was the best opportunity for a big season, won 7 games. And to me, Rutgers has won 9 or more games 8 times in its history, right? Sorry, I got that number wrong. They've won 9 or more games 8 times in 155 years of college football, right?
Right. Yeah.
4 of those were under Greg Schiano.
Right.
They don't get these opportunities very often. And I just keep going back to, this was as good of an opportunity as there was. And I see a lot of people, and I see the fair arguments we have here on this podcast, that 7-5, all things considered, is good. I just think there should be at least a little bit of, I don't know if it's demand or upset or whatever it is, feelings that there should have been more.
Yeah, I certainly, absolutely, I agree 100%, I guess. But you also made the point for us, if you're taking the other side of this, when you describe the 155-year history of Rutgers. How can you be angry about a season at 7-5 when you've been 2-10? I sat there in 2016 and 2017. I watched some of these teams, like, again, and no one wants to hear this, and I get it, and believe me, so I'll whisper it, right? The 2 words that no one wants to hear in this podcast. It's Rutgers. And I get it. Like, people flip out. Oh, why can't we be? But you haven't been. That's what I mean. I get it. You can be. Maybe someday you will be. But right now, I just don't think you can be piping mad about 7-5. If you're Rutgers, you can be disappointed. But you can be disappointed. You can be frustrated. You can kick the dog if you want. But if you're mad about it, I mean, my dog's very sturdy. He can take it. But if you're angry, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, this program sucked. Talk about, well, I've been 9 wins. Didn't get 9 wins in the entire Chris Ash time he was here. You get 9 wins in a year. I don't know. I just think you need to keep that in perspective a little bit. And and you mentioned the offense, and I think, Pat, that's the one thing. Like, if I am feeling good about where this is headed now, that's it. That's like and that was, to me, the biggest thing. They haven't been watchable. They haven't win games. They haven't been watchable in 7 years. We've sat there and just, game after game, when you're like, they go to Iowa, I'm like, well, there's no chance. There's some of these games, there's just they can't win this game. They can't get a first down against some of these teams. Now, suddenly, alas, all right, that gives you hope. That gives you hope that every game will be competitive. And that was that's where the bar was when Greg Schiano started. Let's not forget that. It's just like, holy crap, let's bring this guy back in the hopes that Rutgers doesn't just embarrass itself every weekend on national television. Like, just get to the point again. They're at that point. At least.
I'm glad you remembered that, because if you go back to our summer podcast and when we're previewing this season, what were we talking about over and over again? The defense is here. The offense is here. Can we get the offense to be average? And this team will go take a step forward if that happens. That clearly happened this season. And the offense wasn't just average by the end of the year. It was operating at a high level because the quarterback play from Ethan Kaliakmanis was significantly better. And the receivers have just developed into, like you said before, like budding, legitimate threats in this conference. So that was a huge step forward. And that in itself, the defense was up and down all season long. Injuries, bad play, some good performances. That was the unsteadiness of the season. That's the difference between 7-5 and or 8-9 wins is the defense. So if you look back on how we were grading this season in August, it's I think you got to consider that aspect. They improved the thing that they had to improve the most, and that I think is a step forward.
I would just say very quickly, I wouldn't say people should be piping mad. I think they should be the quiet simmering that many men in this country have the whole life, where they don't really say anything, but deep down inside, they just have this constant hum of like unsatisfaction and being upset. I think that's how they should feel about Rutgers football. And because just because they've sucked for a long time does not mean they have to suck forever. Indiana has the most losses in the history of college football, and they are going to play in the freaking college football playoff. I don't want to hear about NIL. I don't want to hear about any of that stuff. Indiana is going to play in the college football playoff. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's just keep that in perspective and understand that Rutgers could feel good about the way the season ended, and they should, considering all that we've talked about, the way it could have gone. I still think we are at the point with all sports programs, and we can talk about this later with basketball, where the kind of, nervous fan syndrome of saying, oh my God, we can be 1-11 again. Oh my God, things can get so much worse. We're beyond that. Rutgers is at a point at a program where they should aspire to not suck anymore. The bar has long gone beyond that. They should now aspire to be good, to have winning seasons, to win games. And just a couple more points to counteract myself. I listed all the games they could have, should have won. They pulled that Washington one out of their ass, like completely out of their ass. So that could maybe neutralize one of the timeout for Illinois. You can call that a wash, whatever. And on the defense, I do think that Tyrone Powell coming back after the bye, more healthy, playing a lot more snaps, made a difference for that defense. If we're going to point to one major like defensive change, I think him being there is a humongous difference between what they did against UCLA, USC. But I think USC is the only loss, just to end this, the only loss where you can kind of say, it happens.
Let me just counterpoint that you can't. Should you expect every toss up to go your way? If there are 11, so there are 12 games, 3 wins, 1 loss, then that means there are 8 toss ups. Rutgers went 4-4 in the 8 toss ups.
Were there 8 toss ups? Were there really? Wisconsin was bad, like bad.
Wisconsin, but they're not bad. They're not Akron.
Wisconsin 2 weeks ago almost went out and beat Oregon. So Wisconsin had its own issues. Wisconsin was a team that could play with anyone and also just lose to anyone. Right. Sorry, that sounds stupid. UCLA
is a bigger example of a game that lost to Wisconsin, I think.
I agree.
Wisconsin was so bad offensively, it fired its offensive coordinator a month after it dropped 42 points on Rutgers and could have dropped more if they really wanted to.
But it's a toss-up. You would never say, they got to beat Wisconsin. You wouldn't walk out. I mean, that's all I'm talking about.
If it was Wisconsin 10 years ago.
But you can't look at that game and go, you had to win that game. That's all I'm saying by toss-up.
No. Okay. Now we're just going into hyperbole here. No. But I think you feel like you had a chance to win that game. You maybe, I don't know if you.
Of course you did. Absolutely. That's what it should have won. A game you can win. There are 8. Let's maybe put it that way. There are 3 games you must win. 1 game you're not going to win. There are 8 games you can win. I do think it's unrealistic to say Rutgers would win all 8. Certainly 4-4. Maybe that's not a good high enough bar to clear. 6-2 would have gotten you to your 9-win season. Yeah, that's the right.
They won every toss-up game last year, literally every single one.
Yeah,
they made a bowl game last year off of a toss-up games. Right. And we understood that entering the season. Good teams win toss-up games. Is Rutgers a good to great team this year? Probably not. But I think, again, with the context of this was going to be their best team. Again, and to Pat's point, the offense was even better than we could have expected.
That's true.
By leaps and bounds, it was better. Ethan was better to me than I expected. The wide receivers were better. Dave Brock and John Perry deserve a huge pat on the back that we've been giving Pat Flaherty a lot of credit, as we should. Those two guys have been doing a remarkable job with that wide receiver room, not only bringing in talent, but developing it in Ian Strong and KJ Duff.
Right. Yeah.
Everything
Ian Strong developed during the season. That's an important thing to remember too. He wasn't the same. He was a better player at the end of the season than he was at the beginning of the season. Let's keep that in mind. He was very good at the beginning of the season, but he was a different player as the season went on. Yep.
No doubt.
Sure.
No doubt.
We're talking in circles here, but my point is, I think people rightly should feel fine thinking that at the very least, this team should have won 8 games, because that was what we expected we expected as the bare minimum bar of success.
Right.
And I think 9 wins was right there. It's right there.
All right. So 7 wins is going to get you to a bowl. I was thinking about this, and we don't know what bowl it is, and we think we probably the right bowl. But does it? We're debating. Oh, they might be able to get to Charlotte, or does it really matter? I guess is the question I have.
After getting email after email after email, that has been weighing on me a lot. Right?
People do care. Like Music City is that big a deal? Over
no. People say that all of these games, they're the same. It's a mediocre bowl, and there really is no differentiating them. But I do see a difference when you get to the bottom, right? If you're in the game above sports bowl, the old Quick Lane Bowl in Detroit, you're playing a game against the MAC, right?
Yeah,
that's a big difference than playing an SEC team in the Music City Bowl. So I think there's definitely some level of differentiating this, but at the end of the day, I am starting to see that this, if you're not going to make the college football playoff, I don't know. It is what it is. It's a consolation prize.
There are tiers, right? Like there are, the bottom tier is Detroit and Rate. Those are the 2 games you don't want to play. They're the day after Christmas. Rutgers fans are not going to want to travel, and just really, again, the opponent is not going to be great, right? Like I see a lot of Texas Tech for Rutgers in the Rate Bowl. Like that's a fun matchup, I guess, in on paper, but are people really going to be tuning in at 3:00 on December 26th to watch that game? I don't know. But if you go beyond that tier, I think that it's worth it, right? You're playing in Nashville, you're playing in Charlotte, a game that people are going to tune in just to see if Greg Schiano is going to get mayo dumped on his head. You're playing in, the Citrus Bowl against a really good team. Like the Citrus Bowl to me would be worth it, because you're playing.
That's the one. Yeah,
right.
Playing Alabama in the Citrus Bowl is certainly different than playing Texas Tech or TCU or what the hell it is in Phoenix. Yeah, I guess my point being, it's not like the old. Yeah, it's not like the old days where, in 2006 they were one catch away from being in the Rose Bowl. Instead, they went to the Texas Bowl, not the Orange Bowl. Instead, they went to the Texas Bowl. That to me, those were tiers. That's when bowls.
That's huge drop off. Yeah.
Now it's like either you're in the playoff or you're in it, or you're not. I guess that's the way I kind of look at it to the most degree. And I didn't think it would be this way. Honestly, I thought there was still there's a place for, the fun part of the bowl season. It's quirky. It's, I'll watch anybody over Chris. I watch anything, put any game on, and just to sit there for now. And I still will watch a lot of bowl games. I guess from the program perspective, Pat, do you think, is it that big a deal that they're going to be at the Rate as opposed to the Charlotte? They care?
No, I don't think the program cares at all. And the only thing that matters to Schiano is that they're going to get those extra practices. It's like extra practices to get that development in. That is as good of a thing as he could wish for on Thanksgiving. Yeah. So that's what it's all about for him. And right now it becomes the interesting part too. All these guys, what will they do? Are they going to play? There's so many guys that are banged up. I don't know. So that's going to be a whole nother thing.
I hope, and this is funny, I hope Kyle Monungai does not play. And for his own, he does nothing to prove. There's no need to be in that game. Put a headset on, stand on the sidelines, put yourself on TV. And because I love Kyle. If he wants to play. I'll certainly enjoy watching him. But the other point of that is the other running backs look pretty good. Like I wouldn't mind seeing them for one more game. And I'm sure Greg Shannon would like to see them for one more game,
It's not a bad point. And the game that Kyle sat out, Antoine Raymond and Jay Sean Benjamin, they combined for 164 yards. So I think they're certainly going to keep this offense moving at the very least. And then next year, obviously, you get Sam Brown back as well if he's able to go. So yeah, It'll be interesting.
I saw a lot of people with that sentiment, Steve, of like begging Kyle, you've done enough for this program. You've proven yourself. Please don't play. Conserve yourself for the NFL. That to me is the obvious example of that these games don't matter, right? If this game mattered, you'd want Kyle Monaghan to play.
Right. You're the
They don't matter.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right.
These games are losing money for the programs. The only people that benefit are the television executives and the sports betting industrial complex that wants you to dump $500 on Rutgers money line against whatever Big 12 team they're playing. And I guess you can kind of sell it, right? Like it was big for Rutgers last year. They played, a former Big East foe. They get this win. They kind of break the 10-year drought. Now, you play Texas Tech in Phoenix a day after Christmas. Does that really benefit you in recruiting, in program perspective? Does it really? I don't think so.
Yeah. All right. We'll come back to football. We got a bunch of questions from the Discord and from Twitter. But let's go to basketball really quick. Let's dive in there because that was an important weekend for hoops. I was out there through Thanksgiving. Brian, you stayed through the Saturday game. And you're going to, I love it. I'm teeing you up again because you're going to disagree with this take. This is we're like around the horn all of a sudden here. I'm going to hit the plunger. You're going to disagree with this take. And when I say this, I'm not worried. I really am not. And I get it. Like, I don't know what people thought was going to happen here. You're taking 11 guys, maybe 10 guys to cross Jeremiah Williams off the list. 10 guys who have never played basketball at this level, throwing them together in like a blender and saying, hey, go beat Alabama, go beat a top 20 Texas A&M team. Oh, surprise, they didn't do it, but they almost did it to me. I think that's pretty remarkable. I think I see a team I still see a team that's going to make the NCAA tournament. I have lots of questions about the supporting cast. We can talk about that, but I see enough pieces there to make me think that it's possible that Steve Peichel with a couple weeks to work with, a month to work with, is going to be able to cobble that together. Am I wrong?
I agree with most of that, contrary to what you may believe and what many people
thought you were gonna. I thought
I do not. I am not worried per se, right? I'm not. I think I'm actually quite encouraged by how they played, right? I think they played fairly well. I think Dylan Harper is one of the top 10 best players in college basketball, which is to me why I disagree with the fact that them almost winning and looking close is not remarkable. I think it's a huge disappointment because you had an opportunity to get huge quad 1A wins that will help your resume move up one seed line in the NCAA tournament when you're trying to get into the East Regional and get a good seed so that you could play a Sweet 16 game at the Prudential Center 40 minutes from campus. We are at a point where Rutgers basketball has 2 top 5 NBA prospects. They have the two most talented players they will ever have in the history. Rutgers basketball could exist for 1,000 more years. They will never have Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey on the same team again. I'm fairly certain of that. They cannot have these two guys and then say, oh, we almost won. Oh, we came close.
Alabama's going to win. Alabama's going to win the national championship. Like what? I don't know what you're saying. Like, what do you want? Like, they're the best team in the country. I think one of the 3 best teams in the country.
Here's
they played the starting center for Rutgers, an all-time big player, $1 million. He's the 3rd best center on the team. Like, that's how good that team is. It's just, I don't know what you mean. I don't know.
And yet, Rutgers was 5 points away from beating them. They were 2 possessions. They were within 8 points the entire second.
Yeah.
They couldn't
finish.
That is not, to me.
They're not, but they're not. Yeah,
that's not a reason to feel, hey, I feel good. That's a reason to want to hit your head against the wall and say they should have won that game because of how important it would have been and how different it would have been. Listen, Rutgers is beyond the point of moral victories. This is the 9th year under Steve Peichel. They have 2 NBA players. Okay, I don't want to hear about NIL and all that stuff. Dylan Harper scored 37 points. He scored 37 points. You got
November 28th. It's not. If it were February, I'd be like, "Oh, you're right."
Every win counts. Every result matters.
I know, but it's realistic when you're thinking about what this team is going to accomplish. It is a lot to ask this quickly for guys. Pat, be the tiebreaker. Take us across.
Rutgers is not going to face a team of that caliber again until whatever happens in March, right?
Might not. So they might not play another team like that again. There's no team like that in the Big Ten.
Right, exactly. That's the point.
Purdue beat Alabama.
Alabama, results happen. Alabama's a more talented team than Purdue. Absolutely.
Results happen.
This
Why
guy's-
why do we? Play
Alabama's
the
a better
game?
team than Purdue. They're more talented than Purdue.
They beat Purdue. Purdue beat them.
Yeah, right. Yes, and great. And FDU beat Purdue last year. Is FDU a better team than Purdue?
Kennesaw State beat Rutgers. Kennesaw State's not better than Rutgers, but they won.
Right. I know. Yeah, I hear you. Okay.
The results matter.
Pat, go ahead. Finish your thought here.
Okay.
Before Brian and I come to blows today.
The point I was trying to make is that there's a lot of things that are going to happen, of course, in the next month or two, and that's really what matters. We can stack and compare and play this game of who's more talented, who's better, whatever. What really matters is that Rutgers stacks 2 good months, gets better, so that the next time that it faces a game like this, it's in a better situation. And that's, I read what you wrote about Pikel's quote. We learned a lot about ourselves. That's a good thing to come out of this tournament. And so, yeah, you're not worried. The measuring bar is there. So I think just keep chipping away, and we'll see where the chips fall.
Can we Alabama, fine, whatever. They're more talented, whatever. We can. Texas A&M apparently is comparably talented to Rutgers in the sense that they're number 20. Rutgers was 25 last week. Rutgers was up 9 points in the second half, and they blew that game. And again, I'm like this now in November. You keep saying it's November. What about when it's March? The seeding comes out, and they're an 8 seed because they couldn't win big games in the non-conference. They play a really good 9 seed, and then they lose in the first round. What are you going to say? Oh, well, listen, they looked okay. Maybe next year, when they don't have Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, they can make it to the second round. Every result, this is the season of
I get it. You keep on saying, of course, every result matters, but the team wasn't ready. I'm not sure what I can tell you. They're just not. But the expectation you're taking again. 2 very good freshmen, 8 guys who you dragged off the street, threw together in the team in November, and you're screaming that they should. How could there should be a disappointment? You're wrong. It's stupid to think that. There's going to be some growing pains. You're living and you're pretending that these things don't happen in the real world. I got 2 NBA draft picks. No, they don't. It's just they gotta figure things out at a certain point. They gotta learn to play basketball. I'm just saying, you can't be angry about it. To go out there.
Is 24 years old. He's been in college basketball for 5 years. Zach Martini, we spent the entire offseason talking about how he's played at this level and how he played at Princeton. They made a Sweet 16. Zach Martini was the toast of the town in October, and now he's learning how to play basketball.
Well, now you're getting to a different point. You're getting to a different point now. This is the next point on this. The next point on this list is that if I were to be concerned, it's about some of the supporting cast, that they do not look like players at this level. And we're not talking about, well, they weren't ready to play. I wonder if some of these guys are good. Like PJ Hayes looks a step slow on defense, and I'm not sure you're going to coach that up. Zach Martini looks like a Princeton center, right? And I don't think he's going to be the guy you're going to rely on up front. There's a lot of things there, and that's where I'm concerned about the ceiling on this team. Dylan Harper is brilliant. Ace Bailey's going to be just as good. I get all that, but some of these guys they kind of threw in here, and that's the one takeaway I came away with. I'm not sure you can coach up a lot of this, and that's if I'm worried about one thing, it's that.
I'm concerned about the athleticism on the perimeter. Against Texas A&M, they were just blowing past them and getting to the rim. I'm concerned about the depth at center being able to defend the rim, because once they got to the rim, there was almost zero resistance, and both of their top 2 centers fouled out.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about the 3-point shooting. One, because the guys that are actually good at hitting them are not hitting them. They didn't this week. And the guys that shouldn't be taking threes are taking more threes than they should. So the distribution of threes is off. The good guys are not hitting the threes, and they're just not taking enough threes. I mean, they took 13 threes against Alabama and almost won. It's a miracle.
Hit 2 of them. Yeah, right. Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, there are a lot of concerns to this team. And again, listen, we'll dive deeper into this into March or whatever. It comes back to bite them. But it's not. These players weren't assigned to the Rutgers basketball program in the summer like it's a CYO camp. They recruited and added these players.
I know.
Right.
Yep.
So if it doesn't work out, someone's going to be okay. So
Yeah.
Listen, I'm just saying we can talk about that. You could feel good and the results, whatever. I know I keep saying the same thing. I'm just saying the signs of what is happening in November. Well, the signs of what's happening in November and the results of November will be impacting going forward.
We
now,
understand.
if they win at Ohio State,
we agree with that.
if they win at Ohio State Saturday, you feel good about all this, right? If you lose at Ohio State, then you got to wait probably a month to get another chance at a quad 1 win. At some point, you got to start stacking quad 1 wins. They were 86th in the net this morning when it came out, the first rankings of the year. Right. 86 just got you right on the bubble. As I said at the start of this month, this is a team that probably should not be on the bubble, but history says they will be on the bubble. And I think if this team is on the bubble in March,
it's just too early to talk about that. It's just too early to talk about that. So the only point I'm trying to make. They got 12. They got 20 Big Ten games. They're going to win 12. They 11 and 12 of them, and we're not talking about this. And that, I guess that's what I come back to. Like, this experience will be good. I'm not surprised they're not ready. I'm not surprised they lost, and I'm not panicking about it. Like you are.
I'm not either.
Very
I'm
close.
not either.
I'm not panicking. You sound pretty. Does he sound a little panicky? Okay, like you're worried about being a 4 seed. Like I don't think they're going to be a 4 seed. I think they're going to be in the 12. Like they're going to be in the 8-9 game, maybe. Okay,
that's bad.
They're going to get there, right?
They should be in the 8-9 game. They should not be in the 8-9 game. Listen, I'm not panicking. I'm more so upset about the way people talk about Rutgers basketball as though it's 2019 and they have scrappy underdogs like Geo Baker and Caleb McConnell and all these guys like kind of fighting their way to the NCAA tournament. Rutgers is beyond that. And
I don't think they're talking about that. I think they're talking about it being early in the season for a lot of things coming together. That's
why do we play games before January? I don't get it. Why? What's the point? What is the point?
They didn't lose by 37 points. It was a final possession game. That's my only point. That's the difference to me. If they got their butts kicked, I'd be like,
you should be more fired up about losing to Kennesaw State than anything that happened.
That's a good point
in Vegas, right? Like that is way more alarming. That's the game. Like you should be way past losing to Kennesaw State, and then whatever happens in Vegas happens in Vegas, sure. But losing to Kennesaw State and getting destroyed in that game. That's the panic here, right? You can say, okay, we almost beat Alabama. We probably should have beat A&M, but you can still go into the Big Ten season feeling great because you can rattle off a lot of these wins. But if they play the way they played against Kennesaw State, they're not winning a majority of those Big Ten games. So
yeah,
that further supports your point, Politi, that these guys, they got to figure it out. They're gelling. It's early. Even with this talent level, when you have 2 of the best players in the country, 2 NBA picks, whatever, they're still figuring it out, right? So it's a work in progress, and that's why I kind of ultimately lean with you, Politi, that things will kind of fall in line when there's some regularity, some conference opponents that they should be better than, and a lot of time to get better.
A couple things. I'm not panicking. I'm not worried. I feel good about this team. You guys keep saying they'll figure it out and they'll win the games. I saw them lose 2 games in Las Vegas, and you could feel good about it. Sure. We just discussed all the reasons why there's reason for concern. I just think just assuming they're going to win games is maybe a dangerous game to play. I think they'll be fine. I think they'll make the tournament. But again, I think this team should have higher expectations than making the tournament. I think we're talking about playing for seeding, and I know it's too early. I won't say it again.
All right. So structurally with this team, let me ask you this question. Is there, I think you already saw it there in the Texas A&M game. I get it. Foul trouble is at play here. Is he already looking at the same thing we're looking at here with a couple of these guys he brought in and looking for answers? Like we saw a lot of Dylan Grant in that game. And again, he took too many shots. He looked like he was sort of, but I can't be surprised by that. This is his first time he's playing Texas A&M in the second half of this game. Is he now going to start mixing and matching where I think we know for certain there are 4 guys who are going to play a lot? The 2 freshmen, Dirk Hack, Jeremiah Williams, are locked in. They should be. They've been very good. But is he going to start trying to find different players when he brings out the bench, when guys can get foul trouble, or is he got to ride and die with some of these guys like Martini and PJ Hayes?
I mean, you only have 10 guys in the rotation, right? You kind of have to. I think you have to limit some guys, right? Like I think there are certain players who play too many minutes, take way too many shots, and have too big of a role that are going to be, that will iron itself out. And I think once we get to the Big Ten, the rotation will be shrunk to 7, 8 guys. That's just typically what he does, right?
We don't know who they are at this point. Do we know, or do we know who they are?
Well,
That's
you
my
rattled off the top 4 guys, and then obviously you need forwards to play. So
you
Emmanuel
gotta put
Obole
in.
will play, Lathan Somerville will play, Zach
Mhm.
Martini will play, PJ Hayes will play, I'd say. And because you got to have someone on the floor who can hit a 3, right? Like Tyson Acuff will be the microwave first guy off the bench scorer. So I could see. So the top 7 would be the 4 guys you mentioned, the 2 centers, Obole and Somerville. Tyson Acuff, I think, is going to be a consistent figure as a guy as he keeps ramping up. And then you kind of mix and match Martini and Hayes and whoever else you think you could kind of figure in as a matchup dependent thing.
Right.
But I think that what they're learning is that, especially what we saw in Alabama and Texas A&M, Dylan Harper is the best player, most important player on this roster. You put the ball in his hands, he'll make things happen. And I think that's a big lesson from what they took from Alabama. There's nothing wrong with running the ball up the middle every play if you're getting 7 yards a pop. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that.
That's very true. That's very true. And it's fascinating because, some of those you're talking about not taking a 3-pointer, or some of that is because Dylan Harper, when the opportunity to drive and dish, he's just making the shot. Like he's not passing out. And then you saw later in the game, like later, then you see him hitting Jeremiah Williams a couple of times. Like I think he's figuring that out too. Again, it's early.
He's taking too many threes. He had 15 threes in 3 games in Vegas. That's too many threes for Dylan Harper. Ace Bailey's probably taking too many threes. He shot 8 of them against Texas A&M. It's too many. PJ Hayes shot less threes in 3 games than Ace Bailey shot against Texas A&M. That's just not. It's not balanced enough. I think the issue is not that they're not taking enough threes. It's also that the threes they're taking are not exactly wide open threes. I'd like to see some more. I'm not a basketball coach. I don't know how to make it work, but I'd like to see some more open looks manufactured for those guys. And I think Martini really desperately needs to see a shot or 2 go down. I mean, when he dropped that pass from Ace Bailey, which was not a great pass at the end of the game, I just felt like kind of the dejection in him. It feels like he's due a game where he can kind of get his confidence back. Because he's better. He's better than he showed against Texas A&M. I'm convinced of that. I really am. I think Martini will have a role in this team. I just think he had a rough week.
Yeah, it happens. All right. Let's take some questions. Discord was humming. Twitter was humming. Some good topics here. I want to start with this one because I'm fascinated with it, and you have to get your Shiano hat on. Eric Orlando on the Twitter. In terms of Shiano's best teams in version 1.0 and 2.0, is this team in his top 5? 06, of course, is his best. Then he had a few 9-win years, but based on the competition and level of wins, I would say this is top 5 easily. Thoughts? I went down and broke it down. 16 years, 8 of them are under 500. So certainly, I think we can safely say this is in the top 5. I'm gonna rank him this way: 2006, obviously number 1, and then it's funny, and it's really hard to pick number 2. He's got 2 9-win years. His final year in 2011, 2009. I watched a lot of these teams. I think the second best team talent-wise was 2008 when they started at 105, then obliterated everybody. But then you get the grade them on 105. The early games count, as Brian just told us, Pat. I don't know. I think it's right. I think if depending on the bowl game goes, if they win a bowl and they beat a real opponent, they beat a Texas Tech, and you're 8-5, I think he could be there in 3-4 range.
Yeah, I would definitely buy that. The thing is, outside of Washington, was there a win this year that was like, wow, that was incredible?
But there's not in a lot of those. There's not in a lot of
Okay.
those seasons either. Like they don't beat top 25 teams, and I have to look at it closely, but I don't remember like any. Oh my God, certainly didn't beat West Virginia any of those years. Certainly didn't beat.
Right.
Like there's some losses in there that weren't that you remember more than the wins.
I think you're spot on in that range. Like definitely in the top 5, and very well. Depending what happens here, could be 3.
So are we saying talent-wise or season-wise?
Season-wise, I think.
Because I was gonna say like that 08 team wasn't that the team had like the 3,000-yard passer, 2 1,000-yard receivers or something like that?
Right. Yeah. That's why I have both talent and season-wise, because that was a pretty good season. Even in it, again, like 8-5 versus 9-4 is not a big difference really overall. And then the 2011 team. Yeah, it's tough. They are very similar. Those teams, talk about what ifs. There are some what ifs back then on some of these teams where you're just like, woof, man. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's properly ranked. It'll certainly be in the top 5. maybe a couple of notches above in the top 4 or 3. But that I'm not going to go to. All right. Other questions. I keep wondering how they would have fared. This is from Mark, Badger fans. How about that? Keep on wondering how they would have fared if the team stayed healthy. It's not hard to see wins from the UCLA, Nebraska, and other games, Illinois games, and 10 wins. My question is, how do you feel Rutgers is set up talent-wise for next season to be able to stay in the bowl hunt? The problem is not the talent; it's the schedule. I keep on coming back to this. We are back to the days of crossing off games because Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State, right? And maybe this is the year they catch Penn State. It hasn't happened. So until it happens, I'm not going to think it can happen. That's 3 losses off the top. You're at Washington too, and Washington's be better. I mean, it's just so much a tougher schedule that would come back to this. Like, this team could be better on the field and 6-6, right? It could be.
That's a great way to describe it. Certainly, you feel decently confident that the offense is going to be as good from a talent perspective. Even with losing Cal Monunga, you still have the foundation of the offensive line. You have Ethan Caligman back. The receivers are back. So from that alone, you feel pretty good. Obviously, they lose a ton of experience on defense. There'll be huge holes there. But yeah, you're looking for the toss-up game scenario for next season, and they're certainly in those 3 cases are not toss-ups. So it's going to be a tricky one. It's definitely going to be a tricky situation.
The year to catch Ohio State was this year. I think Rutgers lost out on an opportunity to beat Michigan and Ohio State. These are the 2 years. I mean, Ohio State, the biggest egg I've ever seen laid on a football field against a bad Michigan team, begging to lose that game. To really quickly cash a check or write a check that I'm not sure we can cash. I think we should record a pod later in the week where we kind of break down in more depth, like where the roster stands and
for next week. We got plenty of time before the bowl game. It's a good idea. We should do that.
Well, I'd like to do it later in the week because the portal opens on next Monday.
Okay.
And then you never know what is going to happen. So I think we have a window here of a little speculation where we can kind of just throw things against the wall and see what sticks before reality hits us in the face.
Good idea. All right, we'll come back to that. Tune in to the Rutgers Rant, brought to you by the Hellchurch. Later in the week, we'll do that. All right, going through some of these more questions. That's English. So we'll talk about NIL later in the week too. We'll talk about that part of it.
I think we should do big picture,
all that big picture, the whole thing.
Later. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Let's do basketball questions then. At what point is player development an issue outside of Gio Caleb's core? He's got nothing on the role players, transfers, and 3 stars. Well, now he's had them for 15 minutes and they're 24 years old. I'm not sure how much development Steve Michael's doing anymore. I think development was kind of a plus of his. If you're looking at player development now, you're going to look at what Lathan Somerville, I think, is going to look like in a couple of years, and what Ogboli looks like now. I think he's certainly a better player than when he got here. Anybody else, Joe Michael? Anybody else who development-wise that you can even look at?
They had 3 guys back from last year, so it's hard to really develop.
Exactly. Yeah, Jeremiah was a finished product when he got here anyway, too. Right. I mean,
and even then, like, he was hurt half the year last year, coming off the Achilles, and he was dealing with off the court stuff that he had to. He couldn't play. Right. Ogboli looked better last week than he did the week before. I mean, he looked like a completely different player against Alabama. I don't know if you can credit that as development or if that's just a good game from him. I think this is not the year really to discuss development because, again, all these guys are 1-year rentals. I think this is the year to discuss coaching and getting the most out of what you have. And I think this will be a good test for if they can take the good from this week, go into Big Ten play and develop it. I think they'll figure out the defense. I don't know if they'll be a top 10 defense again. I don't think they will. I think they'll be better than what they've been so far. And I think the offense, as long as you have the 2 freshmen on the court, will look pretty good.
People seem optimistic. This is from the Discord. And please send me an email. Ask for an invitation if you want to join this thing. People seem optimistic. Lathan will be back next year, but it will be seen with NIL continuing to sow chaos in men's basketball. Any sense if there's a big picture plan for how to retain talent like him, or can we expect that most of the team to turn over each year because of this, what we saw this past off season? I don't think this past off season is a good judge. The door was open for a lot of those guys this past off season. I don't know that there is a good plan. I do think there's more resources than maybe we give credit for. And this is just, again, talking to people about the Cliff O'More situation. I talked to his guardian for column I wrote while in Vegas. And he said, like, Rutgers was the lowest bid for Cliff, but it wasn't zero, right? They did come up with some money. It's just, I just don't think they were prepared to spend as much as Alabama, and Alabama wasn't the highest bid. I mean, this is how crazy, this will just give you an idea of like how crazy the NIL market is. That he, according to Muhammad Oliver, his guardian, it was offered twice as much to play someplace else. I think probably Georgetown was the team that was bidding in the bidding from Arkansas. Also, Calipari's got money. So think about that from the context. Okay, here's a one-dimensional player, rim protector. Now, Lathan Somerville, if you've watched him, you know that he has got an offensive game already better than Cliff's. You can develop the rest of it. I think he's going to be a really good college player. So, yeah, he's going to be in demand in the portal. No question. If he goes in the portal, he will command a lot of money. I do have questions about that, bro. I don't know if they have the money to retain their players. They better find it. They better figure that part of it out.
I think revenue sharing will take care of that for the most part. I don't know but chaotic, especially, I don't know how much money they're going to get revenue sharing, how much of the pie football is going to give them. But to your point, they do have some money. They got Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey. And while I detailed all of their business exploits in a story last week, I don't think they came here for free. I think thinking that is a bit naive. I don't know that for a fact. I think it would be a bit naive to believe that. So there's some there. I don't know if that's a fountain they can keep going back to. I don't know if it was a one-time thing with those two guys, because I don't think Rutgers is going to be in the market for two of those guys, level those guys again. I think they'll be fine. The issue, though, is that it's always easier for guys to rise their price by going to the portal, going into the market, and testing their value, right? And once you do that, it's very rare that guys come back in, right? So I think it's going to be a matter of what each individual wants to do. And I think that, not just to single out Somerville, I think a lot of guys, if they have productive seasons, the pull to go into the transfer portal will always be there.
Right. Tell us about, you talk about that story for a minute. If people hadn't read it, I encourage you to do so. Dylan and Ace Inc. Just a good look at not only their NIL, but that event, which was just a crazy Players Era Festival built around NIL. It was just a inflection point in college sports at the moment. What did you find out about those two guys and their business assets?
Yeah, they're conglomerates, right? Like, everyone wants a piece of them, and everything they do is monetized, and everything they do is scrutinized, and just to a level that no Rutgers basketball player has even approached. It come close, right? Like, Dylan Harper's coming off the court in his debut game with Rutgers, and he takes the shoes he wore in the first half. He takes a photo of them on the court. He gives it to a guy who runs out of the court, runs out of the arena somewhere, and you're wondering, where the hell is this guy going? The next day, you go on Twitter and you see that Topps, which is a subsidiary of Fanatics, which Dylan and Ace signed to, is selling trading cards with cut-up parts of those shoes and signatures. They're selling packs of them for $10 a pop, and you're hoping to buy the pack that has, the shoe, right? And, like, this is not unheard of, but it's unheard of for a Rutgers player to be in these kinds of things. Even a more recent example, on Feast Week, the NIL store, which kind of provides, merchandise for most players in college basketball and college sports, they announced their top 5 most best-selling items for Feast Week for Black Friday. Dylan Harper had the number 4 most best-selling jersey of all college athletes. Again, this is a Rutgers basketball player. This just doesn't happen. And there was just, I went to a lot of, autograph signings. I went to a lot of events they were at over the past 12 months, and you could just tell, talking to people there and kind of just getting a sense of the place. Like, this is unprecedented. There were 400 people lined up for a Rutgers basketball team autograph session after an event at the Rack in October. The table was at the far end where the student section is, and the line went down the court, up the stairs, around the corner, through the concourse. Like, legitimately long line just for people to pay $45 to get a signature from Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, right? Like, that, this stuff just did not happen at Rutgers. I thought it was really fascinating, and I was really interested at, one, how much they're valued, and 2, how much everyone tries to, take a piece of it. When they do media, they don't just sit down for an interview for 15 minutes, like with the local paper. They have practice facility tours with Bleacher Report and 40-minute podcasts and elaborate photo shoots at the College Ave gym and all these things, right? Like I had a hard time squeezing. It was so much stuff. It was hard squeezing all of that into one story. But I was really interested to just kind of see as big as these guys on the court, off the court, they're just as big.
It is wild. It is nothing we've seen. It really is. It's just, yeah. And to see it up close like that, Pat, I don't know.
Bright lights, Las Vegas. Yeah.
You're lucky you got a ham sandwich when I was coming up. You couldn't buy a kid a burger. So
you'd be lucky to get the Duke's mayo poured on your head.
You could save some of that for later if you got it. Put it in your sandwich, your ham sandwich. Great. Awesome. All right. I don't know if we have any more questions. What else we got? Anything?
I don't know if we touched on this. Are we all in agreement that they're going to the Rate Bowl? Is that kind of our consensus? I'm very confident they're going to the Rate Bowl.
They might be going to the Rate Bowl. I'm not going to the Rate Bowl.
Yeah, I think that's. I was holding out hope that it wouldn't be one of the December 26 games, but I think there's a possibility that they get out of the Rate Bowl. But I would say it's probably 75% Rate Bowl, 25% wishing for something.
A lot of social media buzz trying to get the Duke's Mayo people involved. I saw that on the Twitter, trying to fire them up. Hey, look, Rutgers is selling some mayo. I wouldn't put it. I will say this: when you look at it, the brand, they're going to take the brands. Obviously, Michigan winning now, they're 7-5, so not only are they a brand, but they've got the same record. Nebraska is a better brand. They're going to places like that. Yeah. So if you have a choice, between Minnesota and Rutgers. I don't know. Make a pretty strong case that you take the Scarlet Knights.
I disagree. Why?
Well, they beat them head to head.
That's beat them head to head, and they would travel just away. Minnesota's got some. They're not Wisconsin just because they're up in a state somewhere up there with lakes. I mean, it doesn't mean they're.
They travel better than Rutgers does.
Do we know that they definitely travel better? Minnesota.
I'm fairly certain they do.
I don't know. I think they're just another. They're Illinois. They're not. They're closer to Illinois than they are to Wisconsin travel wise.
I would say I looked at these resumes pretty in depth doing these bowl breakdowns and stuff. I mean, Minnesota, right? They beat USC when it was number 10. Beat Illinois. Their blip is Rutgers, right? That's like their throwaway game. That was the big disappointment. They pushed Penn State right to the wire. Like I would say, if you really looked at the total resume, Minnesota is probably better. Right. But Rutgers beat them, so results matter.
Well, unfortunately, Pat, I think you're looking at this like the NCAA tournament and not the TV show pageantry.
Exactly.
In a world where results actually mattered in college football for the non-college football playoff bowls, I totally agree with you. In a world where the TV execs want to sell and get the juiciest matchup possible, I think Minnesota is.
The last time,
really? I don't. How?
Here you go.
How?
The last 3 bowls. I'm going to give you the last 3 Minnesota bowls. You could blow this theory. Quick Lane Bowl. They're
5-7.
winning streak.
They were 5-7. They went to the Quick Lane Bowl because they were 5-7.
Okay, they attracted 28,521 fans. Pinstripe Bowl, Bronx, 31,100. They played. Who'd they play? Syracuse. Well, Syracuse should have been the draw. 31,000. Guaranteed Rate Bowl. Here you go. West Virginia, 21,020. That's not great. Outback Bowl. So they're in Florida, having a great year. They played Auburn, 45,000. Yeah. So yeah, there's not much of a holiday. Yeah, there's not much of a list here to support your theory about them traveling. I don't see a lot of big numbers.
Do you have numbers for Rutgers traveling?
I mean, but this is
the different. I don't want to hear the Pinstripe Bowl yesterday. I don't want to hear Pinstripe Bowl last year. That's kind of cheating, obviously.
Cheating.
Yes, Pat. I think Minnesota as a brand is better than Rutgers. I mean, Rutgers, to anyone that isn't following the program closely, anyone outside of the tri-state area, they hear Rutgers, they think 2018, 1-11, not good at football. That's just kind of, to me at least, like I think that's the perception outside of those that know what's going on.
I don't know. I just think when Rutgers is good, it's definitely an equal brand as Minnesota.
No, put it this way: neither fan base is bringing anybody to Phoenix on the day after Christmas.
fair.
I think
I think
you
that's
can
fair.
speak on
Good
that.
point.
Minnesota,
Yes, we can agree on that.
Rutgers,
We can
no
certainly
one's
agree
in.
on that.
No one's in. Charlotte, you could drive to Charlotte from up here on January 3rd. I think there's a chance some people would go to that game for Rutgers.
You could fly. Don't they have a hub for American Airlines? Like that, there's like
Oh, you
flights all over
could
the
fly
place.
too, but if you want to load up a van, it's probably like a 10-hour drive, 8, 9, 10 hours.
I made the drive to Virginia Tech. I'm not driving to Charlotte.
Yeah, good point. All right. Pat, wrestling? No, nothing.
Wrestling, they face Lock Haven this week. Just should be a status quo kind of week, but nothing crazy there.
Emotional game for Scott Goodale going against his alma mater, right?
Yeah, yes, and he was just inducted into the Hall of Fame there.
They're buttering him up.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Let's wrap it up there. Since you promised an episode for later in the week, we'll come back, dive into this roster deeply, preview the Ohio State basketball game, I guess, later in the week. And thanks for listening to us yell at each other. See you then.
Thank you for listening to the Rutgers Rant. To participate in the conversation and receive live updates about the Scarlet Knights directly to your phone, sign up at nj.com/insider.